I guess what I want to start with is the notion that, every kid loves to dance. Every kid loves to dance. Every kid is a dancer, but
Mhm.
not all kids become dancers.
Mhm.
Um, and, nature, nurture, all of those things. But aside from talent, which you obviously had, what was the feeling or mentality that caused you to become a dancer? If you can talk about that a bit.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I, I, well, first of all, a lot of it was feedback from, others and parents, and just like a recognition that I had talent. So there was encouragement. Um, but, I felt like a calling at a really early age. I did my first like creative movement class at
Whoa.
three, and I
Whoa.
have
Okay.
it's still with me, the memory.
Yeah.
It was such a profound experience, and I was able to, you know, hold that experience through all my years. So all I did was go into this trailer. My mom took us to a creative class. It was like a portable. We went in. I covered myself up with this black gauzy stuff, and we were supposed to imagine we were something. My imagination just soared. I was this black moth. I wasn't even a butterfly. I was a moth. And, like what happened to me in that experience was like I found myself, and that was three. So, it's just, I guess, our ability to connect connect to something, like feel like a sense of purpose that guides us to our professions. So I connected to that. And then I was really, really interested in acting, right? So I got a lot more encouragement to go into acting than I did to dance, because dance is still fairly devalued in our culture and our societies in the West especially. But so I went into acting and I did film and television. Then it was my experience of feeling kind of like this wasn't quite it.
Mhm.
And the frustration around not really feeling like I was able to be an artist. Because when you go into film and television, you kind of feel like sometimes you're called the talent. You kind of feel like like
Right.
a skill worker, like you're being carted in. You're not really a part of the
Mhm.
process in a really deep way. So it didn't give me that experience of like being the moth, and where every little piece of my imagination, my body, my senses were being used and
Mhm.
activated. So, um, yeah, and I felt really disempowered, just sitting around waiting for the phone to ring and audition. So
Mhm.
that was a further, yeah, that was furthering. Like I was just like, oh, when at the time I went into professional training for dance, I was like, well, I'll just do this for a little while and then I'll go
Mhm.
back to acting. But I never did.
Yeah,
Hope that
that's
answers
right.
your question.
Because so what was the moment when you knew that dance was not just a filler? Like after the acting, you had gone into dance, as you said, and then suddenly you realized, no, dance is something I want to do. What was that moment, if you can remember it?
There wasn't a moment like that.
Doesn't? No.
No.
Okay. It was just a growing awareness, I guess, in some way.
Yeah, you get involved, you get caught. I mean, it's a really collaborative experience, especially contemporary dance. So you get, I just felt like part of a community, a belonging, that I was building relationships inside of, and there's just like, you know,
Mhm.
opportunities guide you to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And before you know it, you've spent in my case, 30 years, and more, because I started earlier than that. So yeah, it wasn't really a moment. There was a moment of realization that I hadn't gone back to acting. There was a
Mhm.
time, there was a window of time in which I tried to go back, and I did film and television classes to get those skills back, thinking I was going to go start auditioning. But then the window closed, and the next gig in dance came up, and the next thing, and I went back into dance, and it wasn't even a conscious decision.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned 30 years. It is, I mean, I know how that is. You have to look back over your shoulder and say, oh my God, it's been 30 years, right?
Yeah.
But you're always in the present moment. But as you're refining your talent and developing various techniques and so forth, I guess I imagine that there's also this dichotomy because you're also have an awareness that eventually the body breaks down and you have ways of dealing with it. I know that dancers dance well into old age, but still
Hmm.
there's this kind of awareness of it. That in some way it must be based on some sense of inner freedom and so forth. But how do you deal with that?
Mm.
That sense that things are not going to be always the same in terms of your feeling of physically, but that the love for
Yeah.
dance is there.
Well, these are great questions. That's a really big question. So it's about aging
Mhm.
in dance. And yeah, it's a process. I think as we age, we also become more refined and more skillful. So that is also going on. Although, of course, you know, some capacities are lost, there's still a lot gained. And it still translates through the body into dance for me, like those refinements. So my experience so far of aging is not really of restriction. It's more and more about, I actually feel better in my body than I
Right.
did when I started at 20. Maybe I don't do all the big, showy stuff as much, but a lot of that is also because I just don't want to,
Mhm.
because I can see that that's not really serving a principle that might be at play. Like, so I've put my focus more on art than thinking about my skills or my techniques as a dancer.
Mhm.
So when you do that, anything's, you know, everything that you have, all your skills, all your materials, no matter how old it is, can work,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes
And
sense.
then, yeah, and then in contemporary dance, there's not the same kind of limitations, although I will also say that there is a lot of ageism in our culture and it finds its way into contemporary dance as well.
Mhm.
And you're constantly fighting that, and there's a lot of sexism in dance as well. So that's another part of it. It's not just aging; it's like aging as a woman, and how that is valued and seen
Mhm.
is something to contend with constantly. Um,
Despite Martha Graham or even Margie Gillis more recently, or
yeah,
any of these things.
definitely. Like there's a Netflix show with a bunch of highlighting a bunch of contemporary dancers, and you would think, "Yay, victory!" Like
Mhm.
contemporary dance has made it onto Netflix. That's incredible. But I think in the first, I don't know if there's going to be another season of it. I never watched it. But the reason I didn't watch it is because in that first season, um, every single choreographer is male except for one. And it's just not a reflection of what dance is. It's
Mhm.
95% women.
Right.
Yeah, but in this current day, a lot of the positions of leadership and power inside of dance, not that there's a ton,
Mhm.
it's still pretty marginalized form, are still going to men,
Mhm.
and more so to men.
More
Um,
so, really, more
More and more
so.
so than the time of Martha Graham and and
Yeah.
even Margie Gillis. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Well,
yeah.
but you're going to have to change that, right?
Well,
If you're given a
interesting
chance.
that you brought that up. I thought I was changing that, and I was really invested in it. And I I've actually, through the pandemic, decided to leave the arts. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation because it's a really good opportunity to talk about all of my experience in the arts, but I can't change it. That's what I've come to realize. I can't change all the forces that be out there
Hmm.
from the position that I'm in as a dance artist. So, because this stuff has started to matter to me quite a bit more than anything else, I've decided to finally, and I am one dedicated person. That's the reason why I've been in it for 30 years. It's just sheer force of will and dedication,
Hmm.
not because of any accolades or, rewards that have come my way. And it was really hard for me to make that decision to quit, but I'm quitting now
So
because
you're
it's not,
quitting.
yeah,
Wow. So
yeah,
despite the fact that you inspire others for
yeah.
all of that, you're going to withhold the inspiration.
Well, that's one way of putting it. I wouldn't say it's a withholding the inspiration. Um, it's actually starting to take care of myself is what it is.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Inspiring others is great for the first little while, but it's not enough to sustain a healthy livelihood or a
Hmm.
healthy body,
Right.
mind. There's so much stress. We're always working with limited resources, always fighting against all kinds of cultural biases and all kinds of things. And everything is about overcoming all the challenges all the time.
What
And
what
and
kind
what
of
the
cultural?
reward there's no financial reward. I've been
Right.
doing this for 30 years as a project artist. So in Canada, we thankfully have, you know, a decent funding structure for artists, but it's still project funding. That means everything that I've done as an artist is an application that I have,
Hmm.
blood, sweat, and tears and stress has
Hmm.
gone into. It's been a deadline, it's been a trial, and it's always constantly trying to justify your experience as valuable. So that's a lot to hold over 30 years. You could continually, you always feel like you're at the start and you're never building anything. And
Sounds like
that's
you need a
not,
break anyway, at the very
yeah,
least.
but it's not like I'm not an artist anymore. And it's not
Hmm.
like I'm withholding my inspiration from
Hmm.
people. I'm transferring it now into, I'm becoming a transformational life coach. And that's all the same principles.
Hmm.
What an artist does is create experiences of transformation for people.
Right.
And that's what I'm going to continue to do. And I'm taking all my skills in artistry and all the embodiment that I know and I understand. And I'm actually feeling like it might potentially be of more service to people.
Hmm.
Getting back to full circle to what you said
Yeah.
is that everybody's a dancer.
Hmm.
Everybody wants access to that, like that dancer inside of them.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Okay.
it's more, yeah.
Well, I hope that really works out well. We'll have to keep in touch to see how it goes. Um, can we talk a little bit about how you were, excuse me, when you started out, you moved into, I guess, what you might call a postmodern display. Part of that was what's called contact improvisation. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. Um, that form has been my foundation. So it's contact improvisation is a dance mind body technique, you could say, that was founded or generated or inspired by the work of Steve Paxton, and then there's this other woman who I shamefully will forget her name right now. And it's a weight sharing practice that's improvised. It works with the principles of physics to generate the movement in flow with, with push, pull, resistance
Mhm.
in with another body. So it's really, this is a beautiful practice that can stand on its own. Like it's not necessarily, it doesn't need to be changed or altered, but for me it's become the sort of like the bread and butter of my artistic palette, and then I go from there to create all of the sort of the really interdisciplinary, experimental works that I've created over the
Right.
years, because the principles of kind of like responsiveness that is involved in that kind of contact based present moment dance have led me to understand how to create bigger and bigger, bigger and bigger things. Um, yeah. So
I
it's
think
definitely
that,
a,
yeah.
go
So-
ahead.
Sorry, I was just wondering whether the name you were thinking of was Nancy Stark Smith. Was that the person you're thinking of?
No,
No.
she's definitely been a huge, important figure and recently passed, but no,
Okay,
Linda.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you saying that you've done a lot of using other forms and I guess martial arts, I guess was one of them, right?
Yeah.
Into influencing how you danced and
Definitely
and
influenced how I moved. Yeah.
and
And it
so
also
forth.
influenced contact improv.
Right. Well, that's what I'm getting at. What
Yeah.
in what way did the
Well, it
did
was
that?
really Aikido principles that Steve Paxton understood that, help create the language and help create the framework for yeah, so he was an Aikido practitioner. And so you'll see in an Aikido class a lot of the same principles being used, or when you just watch Aikido and you're watching people work with people's, so you don't resist the momentum coming towards you, for
Mhm.
example. You don't resist it or try and block it. You flow with it and you use their momentum and their physics power to generate, to subvert, or just, to avert the danger, right? That's what you do in an
Right.
Aikido dance. You flip them. So it's kind of the same thing with contact dance, it's the same principles,
A lot
working
of
with that.
trust.
Definitely a lot of trust, but it's about listening. It's deep listening. And that trust is generated through that process of deep listening and paying attention,
Mhm.
moment to moment. And so I would say that trust is you. It's self-trust. It's not trust in the other person.
Okay.
It's yeah.
What other ideas? I guess postmodernism. There was a Finnish architect, um,
Hmm.
Palama, and you were influenced a lot, I think, by some of his ideas.
Yeah, so Juhani Pallasmaa, he is this beautiful writer. He's an architect who's become an author, and I was influenced by him more recently. So, as my artistic practice, my choreographic works matured, I found a lot of resonance in his writing. He spoke about space, he spoke about how this kind of co-creative way in which with our perceptions, we make meaning out of space in the
Mhm.
places that we're in. And that is a huge part of anybody's artistic practice, whether they're aware of it or not. We're using, of course, the space of the theater, the lights, and all these different
Mhm.
things. But it had been a particularly huge part of my practice. So when I found him, I was like, really inspired. The My creative partner who I was working with was really inspired by architecture in general already. So we brought our interests together and we pursued Juhani Palasma and we consulted with him in Helsinki. Well, I did in 2016, and then I flew a team back out there of creative collaborators to meet with him again in 2018. We had a residency in Helsinki, and then we came back and we created this roaming piece throughout a space, the Anvil Center in New Westminster, um, that had the audience on two tracks in two different, very different but similar sequences of experience. And really, the intention with that piece was to just really highlight how the experience is happening within the audience. And it's
That's
not really
interesting. Yeah.
about the dancer. It's not really the dancer as an object that we receive all the meaning from. It's actually our experience in our own bodies and our own imagination that's being activated.
Mhm.
So it was really like foregrounding that and backgrounding this like the whole concept that we have, especially in dance, that the dancer is the object of perfection or beauty or excellence or whatever kind of virtue we're ascribing to it. And we're the passive observers. Instead, it's like you are the active agent in this work.
And how did the audience, did they share their responses with you from the
Yeah. I
performance?
mean, it was, yeah, people were in tears. It was an incredible piece.
Hmm.
And what we did, I mean, it was kind of an ugly building. There was a lot of like, it wasn't an idealist, like the building was cold and incongruent in many
Mhm.
ways. But what we did with those principles of just like letting go of, judgments about the space, just noticing what's the opportunity here through my eyes, through my skin, through touch, through sound. What are the opportunities present in this space and directing attention toward them? So many beautiful, magical things happened,
Hmm.
and so many beautiful awareness. Like dancers were dancing um, in another room down the hall because of the reflection of the windows and then the reflection of the other windows out there and then the cityscape out there. It looked like they were dancing in the room with you. And so we just directed attention to these certain things that were just present in the space.
Hmm.
And through that process and through the daily repetition of the performance, because we had two performances a day, the space changed. It really did. It really changed. It became like the most beautiful, magical building. So
Yeah.
that speaks to the creative potential that we have as observers. We are actually co-creating this experience together. Yeah.
That's very interesting. The phenomenologist Maurice Merleau-Ponty, who I like a
Yeah, who's a
lot.
huge influence on Juhani Palasma.
Yeah, so I like him. Particularly his notion of intersubjectivity. Now, the thing that always influenced me, I never thought of it before with inanimate objects, although
Hmm.
inanimate because there's suggestion that they're animate in other ways. But
Hmm.
that, for instance, with intersubjectivity, you're aware of the tree being aware of you, kind of
Hmm.
thing. And then you create a certain kind of loop, and it creates a very special kind of awareness.
That's right.
That's easy to sort of easy to do with living things, if you know what I mean by living things. Buildings and machines, somewhat harder, I imagine. How do you animate them just through
Well, I think
performance? I mean,
dance is in a particularly unique and special position to be able to do that. And that's what my work was really focused on. Yeah, so and there's a lot of different writers and political theorists speaking to this subject of,
mm,
non other than human materialities and
right.
agency that they might have. But I think it's not hard when you tap into the perceptive like our perceptual, like our body-based ways of knowing.
Hmm.
When you emphasize, like when you bypass these kind of narrative ways of
Hmm.
understanding theater or dance, and you just emphasize a little bit more the senses and what's happening in the senses, and
Right.
you make that the directive guiding principle of the work, it happens. It just happens naturally because in truth, it is happening naturally inside of us all the time.
Right.
We're
Okay.
interacting with these things and we're creating like a presence-based kind of meaning with them. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's hard, it's a big subject.
It is. Sometimes it's easier to know it without saying it. Once you have to say it,
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why dance and art can do that. And so many artists are inspired by that subject right now because it
Mhm.
really is part of their
Yeah.
understanding. Yeah.
Um, I'm thinking of the dance community in Vancouver, especially compared to, let's say, LA, New York, Toronto, Montreal, is quite small, you know, and as you very well know, and if I think of the community not just as dancers, but dance lovers, people who support all of that. Um, what how can dance grow in Vancouver? Does it have to take a dancer to become a minister of culture, or like what needs to happen?
Well, first of all, there is actually a huge community out here. I don't know. I've been in a lot of different places, but there's actually a huge number of dance artists living in this city right now. And 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 I think that inside of that question, if I might be honest, is that this value judgment that Vancouver's problem is its lack of growth. And I don't really think that that's necessarily what it is. Like, there might be a lot more dancers and a lot more arts in Toronto and LA. I'm not sure that there is, but it's not necessarily an indication of of having a robust or vital or successful
Mhm.
community. Um, I think that what really needs to change, you're right to ask that question that, you know, but I think what really needs to change is um, is this deeper cultural systemic thing around the way we value our bodies and the way we value body-based ways of knowing and bodily experiences. And that's really kind of at the core of what's keeping, dance marginalized as an art
Right.
form.
I guess what was behind my question, I was hoping to lead to it, um, is this kind of crazy idea that dance could become a core part of the ordinary school curriculum.
Oh, that would
Not
be
just
awesome.
not
Yeah.
just an after school elective, but a core part of the curriculum. And it is in some, as you know, obviously Waldorf does it in some form,
Yeah.
but and in arts, specialized art schools do it. But how about a regular school? What would that mean to have that as part of the curriculum? How would that change things, you think?
Well, I think that would directly address what I just said, right?
Mhm.
If we had it as part of our as a cultural fabric, like in some places that it is, it's an essential part of like just being human, singing and dancing. Here
Right.
we get singing, but we really don't get dancing in the West, right? So yeah, if it were there just in our family structures and our school structures, like in an education system, and we all had access to it, we'd be less scared and intimidated by watching it and engaging with it in other ways. Um, it would mean everything to have that. Though that said, there is still a lot of ways in which dance can actually, like dance training can do
Mhm.
a lot of damage.
Oh, really? In
Yeah.
what ways? I mean,
Well,
the very sort of old, like formal things like ballet, you mean, and
yeah,
so forth?
yeah. And the ideas that are in there about what's okay, what's acceptable to do to yourself, to
Hmm.
do to your body. So it can do damage to you personally, physically, but it also can do a lot of damage up here. And unfortunately, right now, still a lot of our what our default to when we think about dance is some of those more traditional methods, like ballet. And so, what I would hate to see is that we start implementing ballet training in in
Right.
school.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you this. What do you remember as a particularly special performance of yours that you could tell us that we might, possibly find if we check the internet and so forth?
Well, there were a few. So one that I spoke of, Fragile Forms,
Mhm.
which was this piece that, unfortunately, the video documentation of that isn't nearly doing justice to the actual experience, but that one, and then the most kind of significant, pivotal piece that I made, maybe, maybe my masterwork, I'm not sure, was called Plaything, and that I did in 2011. Yeah, and it was with my son, and the whole work was created collaboratively with three very special, four very special artists. So a composer uh, and three visual artists. Um, and we were focusing on my son's artwork, his stories, and he, from the age of 5 on to at the time he was 9 when we did the performance. And we're just using that as material to investigate this kind of power dynamic, mother child power dynamic, and kind of invert it from, well, just, there were many things going on. We were looking at violence, imaginary violence, because my son's drawings were filled with sword fights and deaths and whatever. And I was countering imaginary violence with the real violence of childbirth. So it was really bringing childbirth as like what it is to be born and how
Mhm.
that's extreme. And then we were looking at motherhood and child and this idea that somehow gets inverted. Often you feel like as a mom, like that you're the victim of the child. So we were
Right.
looking at that. We were changing that up. And then this whole sense of like how the ordinary and the mundane things are are materials for like the extraordinary, how they can open us up to the extraordinary. So that piece is it was hugely collaborative. Everybody's a contribution and art was given equal value, and I saw myself as just another object in the space in some
Mhm.
ways, or we were all subjects.
Right.
The artists actually were on stage with me. My son was on stage with me, and it was a constantly shifting landscape of different. It was kind of built episodically from one thing to another, and yeah, it was super fun too, and
That
quite
sounds
funny.
wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds very good. I wanted to,
And you can catch that online.
yes, you can. Okay, good.
Yeah, all of
All right.
our work, Machine Noisy's work, is online on Vimeo.
Okay,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, thank you. We'll, when we put it on the website, I want to be able to make those links for people so they can explore for themselves.
Hmm.
Well, since you've made your announcement that you're going to be leaving dance, at least professionally, I want to give you the opportunity, if you wish, to talk about some of your plans, your wishes, your dreams for this new path you're taking as a life coach, a creativity coach. Anything you want to say about it? So go ahead.
Yeah. I'm 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 s- I'm I mean, we always are, but I'm definitely a work in progress right now. So what I need to say about it is still not clear. I'm really trying to navigate a huge transition. Um, but what's helpful for me is to remember that I am an artist and that my value does not rest in the work that I created. My value as an artist and as a human being is something I take with me wherever I go. And why I'm inspired to, well, why I'm guided to work as a transformational life coach is because it's literally working with those same skills that an artist works with, which is engaging curiosity, growth mindset, being comfortable, learning how to be comfortable and navigate uncertainty. These are all things that an artist needs to do to be in the process without
Mhm.
shutting down and controlling and prescribing things, right?
Right.
You're in part of that co-creative process. So that's what that's what it made me feel that this was the right path to take. I needed because of my really needed to stop self-sacrificing for art and start actually learning how to take care of myself and my basic human needs.
Mhm. Yeah.
One of
Like
them being
what
like
a novel
financial.
idea.
What a concept, eh?
Yeah.
But you really get that screwed up when you start going into arts, and there's a lot of pressure to like just do it for the love of it, kind of
Mhm.
things. But yeah, I think it's an artistic practice actually,
Mhm.
being a transformational life coach. And
I
it's like it was a revelation to me to realize that I could use all those same principles that I was so versed at
mhm.
in service of myself, in service of my own life, in service of all my relationships and work. And I could be like a co-creative agent in my own life instead of like wait for shit to come to me or not come to
Mhm.
me and feel like a victim to everything.
But people coming to you for that kind of coaching, I imagine,
Yeah,
let's say, a young person who's 20 or so who doesn't know where to go, or a middle-aged person who
yeah,
feels stuck and lost in the middle of their life, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, but it's, the training that I'm part of, it's a very a high level and it's really, it's specific to women. So it's really about helping women in the different cultural patterns that have been sort of passed down through our DNA, really.
Mhm.
Um, so that's really who I'm looking to serve in
Okay.
order to serve everybody. Because when women get empowered, they kind of lift everybody up.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to make that clear. I think there
Mhm.
are probably enough women out there that.
I think there are, and really those are, it's usually women. And I say that with the caveat that I totally, absolutely believe that that men can engage it and it's not specific necessarily to the sex that you've been assigned at birth, but it's a fluid thing, principle. It's a
Mhm.
feminine principle that that I'm working with. But realistically, most of the clients that are coming to do this kind of work are women.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Is there somebody who's been an inspirational figure for you in this new venture? Some cultural figure?
Yeah, I'm my mentor teacher right now is Dr. Claire Zamet.
Okay.
And her work can be found through her platform, which is called Evolving Wisdom, which hosts her work, her husband, who's a spiritual teacher's work, Craig Hamilton, and Jean Houston, who's a very, very
Oh, yes.
famous.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so all of their work is of that sort of like human potential movement,
Mhm.
human evolutionary movement. And her specific body of work is called Feminine Power.
Okay.
It's kind of a
Good.
cheesy name, but
Well,
It
as the
works.
father of two daughters, why not?
Yeah.
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 Okay, well, is there anything else you want to add? This has been great. Thank you, Delia. Anything you want to add to this?
Uh, no, I mean, your questions were really great. Thank you so much for being so well informed too, and being so sensitive to this subject. Yeah, I
Well,
really enjoyed talking to you.
thank you, Delia.